Bubba on politics. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Spratly Islands, the South China Sea dispute. First off, I'm going to start with a I don't know how brief, but I'll give a timeline and talk about the geography and why it's important in the dispute that has arisen and why so many countries seem to claim the Spratly Islands, which is really the focal point of the South China Sea dispute. So, anyway, I will start by saying, again, thank you for tuning in, if anybody is tuning in. Okay, first off, the Spratly Islands are a group of 14 islands that are more than 100 reefs that are disputed out of 45 islands. The archipelago lies off the coast of Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia. They're named after a 19th century British whaling captain who sighted Spratly Island in 1843. The islands contain only about 2 square kilometers or 1.2 square miles of actual land, spread over a vast area of 425,000 kilometers or 164,000 square miles. To put that in perspective, these tiny islands occupy are spread over an area that would cover the entire country of Paraguay, which is 157,048 square miles, but slightly less than Iraq, which is 169,235 square miles. The entire archipelago lies in the South China Sea, or West Philippine Sea, well, whichever you want to call it, which makes matters complicated as far as governance and economics, owing to their strategic location in the shipping lanes, which 30% of the world's shipping passes through here. They have no indigenous people, which means you're never going to run across a Spratlian. They do, however, possess rich natural resources, fishing especially, and the chances are they have huge resources of oil and gas underneath, natural gas. So, which is why there's such a struggle for controlling them. Some of the islands do have civilian settlements, but out of the 45 islands, cays, reefs, and shoals that are occupied, all contain structures which are occupied by military forces from Malaysia, Taiwan, China, the Philippines, and Vietnam. And not to be outdone, Brunei also has claimed an exclusive economic zone in the southeastern part of the Spratlys, which includes the Louisa Reef. They contain no arable land, no indigenous inhabitants, and very few have a permanent drinkable water supply, which I believe the only island it does is the island of Taiping, which is claimed by ROC, or Republic of China, or Taiwan, as it's generally referred to. Now, the 14 islands that are contested are all occupied. 7 of them are occupied by the Philippines. Taiwan has 1, and Vietnam has 6 of them. And economic activity includes obviously commercial fishing, shipping, and guano mining, which is never thought people would be fighting over crap, but there's a lot of birds that occupy the islands, so that is a huge, huge source of fertilizer, and it's supposedly very, very sought after. Now I will give you a brief timeline. Uh, Now, I only went as far back as 1877 because I just could not see the point of going all the way back to 200 BC because to me that's kind of pointless. Okay, 1877, the British first legally claimed the Spratlys. In 1887, Chinese-Vietnamese Boundary Convention signed between France and China. The Sino-French War said that China was the owner of the Spratly and Paracel Islands. And in 1902 and again in 1907, China sent naval forces to place flags and markers on the islands. 1933, France claims the Spratly and Paracel Islands on behalf of their then colony, Vietnam, which was also known at that time as Indochina. They built weather stations and occupied Taiping, which is the largest island. Occupation, of course, was protested by China, but because, shoot, I lost my place. Oh well. But anyway, moving right along here. I'm getting a message from somebody. Okay, moving right along. Moving right along. 1933, France. Okay, blah, blah, blah. On behalf of the colony, builds weather stations. Occupation protested by China because of France admits finding Chinese fishermen there when French warships visited nine of the islands. And the French ran them off. 1935, Republic of China claims sovereignty over the island. Then in 1939, of course, the Japanese occupy some of the islands, and the Japanese end up using them as a submarine base up until 1945, of course, when the Japanese surrendered. 1946, Republic of China, Taiwan sends ships to take control of islands after the Japanese surrender. Republic of China, or Taiwan, then garrisons the island of Itu Aba, also known as Taiping. In 1946, they posted flags. Their aim was to block French claims via Indochina. Republic of China draws a U-shaped map claiming entire South China Sea. 1949, Republic of China withdraws due to losses in the Chinese Civil War because they absorbed a massive amount of losses. In 1956, the Republic of China reinstates troops in response to Thomas Clomas' sudden claim to the island as part of Freedom Land. He was a pretty colorful guy, Thomas Clomas. I think I'm saying his name right. But he was quite the colorful character. In 1946, the U.S. reminds the Philippines that the Spratlys were not Philippines territory. They did it so as not to anger Chiang Kai-shek of Republic of China or Taiwan, and the Spratlys were not included in the treaty in 1898 between the U.S. and Spain, ending the Spanish-American War. 1958, People's Republic of China claims Spratlys. North Vietnam reckons PRC claim respecting 12-mile limit of territorial waters. But although the letter did not actually address the issue of defining actual territorial boundaries, North Vietnam recognizes it until the end of the war with the South, at which point North Vietnam claimed them and admitted that they only recognized the People's Republic of China's claim because Vietnam was receiving aid from them to fight the United States. Okay, and then all was quiet until 1988, when Vietnam and the People's Republic of China engaged in a naval skirmish by Johnson South Reef, or also known as Mabini Reef. 1999, Philippines Navy ship number 57 BRP, the Sierra Madre, was run aground on purpose near Second Thomas Shoal to establish an outpost. And to this day, Filipino Marines are still occupying it and claiming it. And one thing I've noticed is China and Taiwan back each other's claim. I guess it kind of goes along with the so-called one China policy that Beijing claims. May 2011, Chinese boats attacked 2 Vietnamese oil exploration ships. Again in May 2011, Chinese vessels opened fire on Vietnamese fishing vessels. Yeah. Boy, that really takes guts. Open fire on some fishing vessels. June 2011. Philippines began officially referring to South China Sea as West Philippine Sea. So, which I find is an interesting side note, because that means every Filipino up until 2011, everybody who went to school was always taught that it was the South China Sea. Well, now they're going to be calling it the West Philippine Sea. So it can get kind of confusing. Okay, moving on. July 2012, the National Assembly in Vietnam passes a law stating Vietnam's sea borders and includes the Spratly and Paracel Islands. So now you've officially got 3 countries who actually visibly have a stake in it, because the 3 of them all occupy some of the islands. So, of course, they said in the U.S. anyway, possession is 9/10 of the law. So that just creates another obstacle to overcome. April 2015, U.S. surveillance notes that China is building an airstrip on Fiery Cross Reef. 2013, Philippines asked for arbitration against the People's Republic of China's claim on territory. 2016, the United Nations Court Law of the Sea sides, or PCA, the arbitration sides with Philippine claims. People's Republic of China and the Republic of China both reject the claims made by the Philippines and say they're going to ignore the court's ruling. So now we are stuck in this lovely mess that we have. I think a big issue here, one of the big things is a lot of it has to do with one allies. Uh, at this point in time, it looks like Russia has so far sided with China. And of course, the United States backs the Philippines claim. And I don't know about Vietnam. So, who, if anybody, backs their claim? So, but I think the big wild card in this, which it's funny, you don't really hear them mention much, would actually probably be India, because India has had border disputes with China before. They had a little mini war in, I believe, 1968. And India, while not as big, nearly as big as China land wise, though it is pretty big, population wise, is just barely behind China. When I looked at their manpower comparison. India has 616 million manpower available. China has 750 million men available. Out of that, though, fit for service, India has 489, 600,000 million men that are fit for service. China has 619 million that are fit for service. So China has a bit of an edge there. But as far as reaching military age annually, India is 22.9 million. China is 19.55 million. So India has the edge in that department. And I think I've read from a couple different sources that I think by 2050 that India will actually outnumber China population wise. So India is kind of like the hibernating bear, you almost might say, because they're not really too fond of China. And in active military personnel, India has 1.3 million, but as we see, they could easily boost that number up. And China has 2.3 million. So active military reserves, again, China just barely has an edge in that department. China has 2.3 million active military reserves, whereas India is 2.143 million. But in a lot of things, China is ahead, but just barely. The only thing I notice a really huge Chinese advantage, a couple things actually, would be in attack helicopters. China has 200 attack helicopters. India has 19. And fixed wing aircraft, China's ahead 1,385 to India's 809. Fighter aircraft, China also again has the advantage 1,230 to 679. But I would think India probably has better quality, because I know most of the Chinese Air Forces are J-15s, which are pretty much all they are is just a Chinese ripoff of this Russian Su-27 fighter aircraft. So, and the United States definitely has a huge advantage in that department as far as fighters, because J-15 would probably be maybe on a par with an F-18, although it was actually the Su-27 was designed more, I think, to be in the class of the old F-15s, F-16s. So I think the Hornet's just a little bit better. But as far as the F-22 and the F-35s. China has nothing in that class yet. They're supposed to be developing a J-20. It's not quite yet been rolled out. So we'll see, but I think it'll be considered maybe a fourth generation stealth fighter. Uh, Whereas the F-35, I believe, is considered a fifth generation. But I don't know. In a lot of ways, I think the F-22 may be a better plane than the F-35, but I'm not quite sure. Although, as far as flying, with some of the things the F-35 is able to do, is really quite impressive. India also has, I believe, 2 aircraft carriers. So, yes, they have 2, and China has 1. And keep in mind, China's one is a Liaoning class, which is they basically bought a Ukrainian rust bucket from. So it was built in the Soviet Union era, and the Nikolaev shipyard, which is in the Ukraine. But as far as carriers, I mean, India even outnumbers some carriers. The U.S. outnumbers. The U.S. has 10 carriers, Nimitz class, including 1 Ford class now, and they also have 9 other ones, which would be considered America class, which the difference is a Nimitz class carrier is much bigger and can carry 55 F-35 fighters, whereas an America class carrier can only carry 20. So to give you an idea of the difference in size, and a Nimitz can carry up to 90 aircraft. That's helicopters, spy planes or surveillance radar planes, helicopters, all that. And plus 2, a Nimitz could stay at sea for 20 years without refueling, whereas the Liaoning class carrier, I believe, runs on electric or diesel, but they're not nuclear powered, so they can't stay at sea for very long. And they're only self-sufficient for a very limited amount of time. But anyway, so as far as that's concerned, it's really a matter of, I mean, one-on-one, the U.S. can definitely match up with China. No, as far as Navy-wise, and Navy has a huge part of it. And plus 2, if China's Navy was really that impressive, they probably would have taken Taiwan by now, but they haven't. But of course, that's part of the, I guess you could say, the detente between China and the U.S. The U.S. doesn't pound North Korea in the sand, and China doesn't pound Taiwan in the sand. So it's kind of a stalemate in that respect. But anyway, if people can feel free to call in or type in the chat box, but I'm the only person here and I'm talking to myself. So what fun, but it's okay. Anyway, I will go ahead and end this live cast, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to learn something, and tune in next week at about 10 p.m. Monday night, the same time, 10 p.m. Philippines time. I am going to talk about the Korean Peninsula, the issues there, and hopefully get a few calls. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing great and has a great day tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. This is Bubba on Politics, and I am out.